I moved into Unit A on Elridge Drive just over a month before that rainy October night changed everything. After my divorce, all I wanted was somewhere quiet, practical, no reminders of the past life I'd worked so hard to escape. West Hartford felt distant from Boston, but familiar enough to settle in. The duplex was older, a little drafty, with that faint wood smoke smell lingering in the walls. Perfectly modest. The landlord assured me Unit B had been vacant for months. My office was in the front corner, just off the entry. At around 9 p.m. most nights I'd hear noises, thuds, the dull scrape of furniture against floors. At first I blamed the storm, the rain pounding against siding and gutters. But then it happened on clear nights too. I'd pause my Zoom calls, tilt my head. Was that dragging sounds from next door? After all, I told myself, this house had siblings. Walls are shared. Settling happens. One Tuesday night, I saw movement in the glass slit near my front door. My heart jumped. I opened it. Nothing. Rain dripped onto the stoop. I thought maybe I'd hallucinated it. Nerves elevation from overwork. Still, I took pictures showing boot prints in mud installments days later. Fresh prints tracked inside, heading toward my hallway. I texted my landlord, Neil. He insisted Unit B was still empty, no service visits, no one with spare key access. He sounded apologetic, confused but firm. I bought a motion sensor light for the porch, and still the sounds persisted, always around 9 p.m. But on Friday it all came to a halt, then exploded. I was rinsing dishes, winding down after client calls from London. Water dripped, dishes slipped. I heard whistling soft and off-key right next door, inside my walls. I froze, turned the tap off. Silence. I took a slow breath, walked toward the living room. And there he was. In my recliner in the corner, a man with a soaked hoodie, silently whistling a broken tune. He didn't move when I gasped. No blink. Just swiveled his head toward me. That crooked smile. I backed away, grabbed my phone, called 911 with trembling voice, locked myself in the bathroom. The floorboards creaked faintly behind the hollow door, but nothing else. Through the crack, I could see the bathroom light painting a soft glow in the hallway. I tried to steady my breathing as familiar yet ominous silence returned. When the police burst in, I heard them shout, "Get down! Show your hands!" But when they announced, "Sir, you can come out," I emerged to find the officers standing beside the man in the recliner. He simply sat. No resistance, no explanation. He didn't speak, just looked at me with that same smile. One officer, wide-eyed, said, "He didn't match any missing persons, no prints, no ID. He carried only your utility bill." Shivers. Neil watched the follow-ups. Within days, neighbors' Nest footage revealed the man had been entering nightly, through the attic crawl space linking the two units. I'd believed in Clin's apparition, but someone had found that hidden path. The walls I thought offered privacy instead served as a bridge. After that night, I couldn't sleep in the dark. I installed new locks, deadbolts, window jammers, and bought cameras in every corner. I moved soon after, one suitcase at a time, but the memories refused to leave. I still wake to nights where I hear breathing at the door, that crooked grin hovering in darkness. And I wonder, was I ever truly alone in that house? Settling into the new place didn't quiet my mind. I found a small one-bedroom condo not far from Elridge Drive, with better locks and no shared attic access. Daylight helped sanity, but at night the dream replayed. Rainy windows, the creak of the recliner, the tune that formated itself in my skull. I started meeting neighbors, Mrs. Patel next door, retired librarian, who said she'd lived there 20 years and unit neighbors always changed. She gave me a spare light bulb and warned about weird drafts through vents. I laughed politely but knew that house had secrets. One evening, 6 weeks after moving, I ran into Officer Kelly, one of the responding police. He looked at me kindly. "Lucas, just checking in. You're safe, right?" I nodded. I forced a smile, but his eyes traced pain lines beneath mine. "You took the right steps," he told me. "Not everyone escapes so early." His words settled in my chest. I started therapy again. Talking helped a little. I realized I'd been running physically, but the trauma stayed. Dr. Marin asked, "What does whistling mean to you?" I shrugged. I said it felt like someone mocking me, like they knew they could get beneath my skin. That slipping sound, that melody repeating in rainwater's rhythm. Fridays kept haunting me. I avoided cooking at 9. I turned on fans to mask noise. I checked locks obsessively. I drew blueprint diagrams of the attic crawlspace. I called Neil again, demanding he inspect the path between units. He hired a contractor. They found damage to original drywall, evidence of forced entry, insurance fights, and local code violations. Later, he finally apologized and paid for my move. Yet every time I explain I just moved, I add, because I heard whistling at night. People nod with half belief. They don't get it until they see someone in their house. No weapon, no demand, just stillness and a stare. That moment kept replaying, looped in my mind. One month I rented a storage locker to store excess items. I'd gone to pick stuff up at night. The building was empty and quiet. I approached the auto door, heard whistling behind me. I spun. No one. I rushed inside, heart pounding, safe inside a steel cage with other boxes. But the whistling echoed in my mind enough to trigger panic. I left, keys shaking. My mom used to whistle when I was a kid. It meant dinner or some greeting ritual. But that night, recounting my panic made me see the irony. The tune in my office wasn't warm. It was invitation without welcome. After that moment, I changed my ringtone to a whistle so I could flip triggers into something greater. Power. It took months of vigilance, nightmares, insurance calls, and therapy. I learned the crawlspace was originally meant for utility conduit, rarely inspected. He'd used a ladder, shimmed the trapdoor open, climbed into my unit when I was deep into work or asleep. No weapon but proximity sufficed. And the mail he held. That broke me. He'd been inside my house, holding papers that weren't his. I took comfort in mundane acts, changing sheets, watering plants, early evening walks around leafy streets. I purchased a small dog, Milo, a mellow cocker spaniel who barked at strangers. Milo's presence calmed me. He didn't distrust at all, until one night, when I was alone watching a movie. He jumped and growled at the corner recliner. I paused. Nothing beyond shadowed quiet. But Milo stayed alert. I took that as healing. I was no longer alone. Not mentally, not emotionally. I still have the crawlspace diagram taped above my desk. Unit footprints, attic entry, lock placements. I tape sticky notes by my door, check bolt. Camera active. I don't regret moving, but I don't take comfort in it. Trauma doesn't fade in tidy timelines. It threads itself into daily routines. I never considered myself paranoid. I just became careful. I kept my phone within reach, flashlight by the bed, pepper spray, though I hope to never use it. Then I published a blog post about my experience, not to scare people, but to warn them. I described the crawlspace risk in older duplexes, the attics invisible to tenants. Within a week, I got an email from someone named Jenna in Michigan. She wrote, "My husband works in data security. We recently moved into a Victorian duplex from 1924. We went into the attic for insulation repairs. We locked everything. We assumed no one could get in. Thanks for your post. I'll supervise the contractor next time." That message sent something warm through me. I realized horror turns into vigilance, and telling helps other people avoid becoming victims. One evening, I found my inbox filled with similar messages. People sharing warnings, asking questions. Some wanted emotional support. I answered them slowly, drawing lines between shared terror and secure action. Still at home, the nights remained tense. I installed a medical-grade panic button. It links to local police. One tap and they're dispatched. I've tested it. Friendly officers gave thumbs up, told me it was fine. Then came a late October night, not so dissimilar to the first. Rain slashed the windows. I was working. Late call with London client. Around 9:05 I heard it, the soft, uneven whistle. My stomach lurched. I paused. I snapped off the mic. I stared at the screen. I pressed pause on the Zoom recording and muted all sound on my computers. Milo started growling softly, paws stiff, ears forward. I froze. The whistle continued. My breathing shallow, I edged toward the door, hand straining toward the panic button. But I told myself, check the cameras. I opened the security app. The front porch camera showed nobody. The living room cam showed empty corner. Attic trapdoor sensor, inactive. I exhaled sharply. Maybe it was a prank call disguised as whistling and a sound effect. My heart beat near breaking. I restarted the Zoom and tried to carry on, but my throat closed. I stood up, announced to the empty room, "We're done." I shut the lid. No apology. I turned everything off. I realized the whistle might never return. The man left the duplex for good, but the echo in the mind persists. I recorded a voice memo summary. Diagnosis, triggers, steps I'd taken. I shared it with a trusted circle, therapist, a few neighbors, and Officer Kelly. They listened without judgment, offered reassurance. I realized then that living safely meant more than locks and cameras. It meant reclaiming trust in myself, in others, in routines. I would not rebuild the same motion-triggered triggers. I would build new patterns. Milo's bark as a signal of safety, nighttime rituals of journal writing. They grounded me. The months that followed were quieter. Work turned into routine. Milo turned into company. I invited friends over to watch football games. I hosted a small Thanksgiving dinner. For the first time since before Boston, the house felt like mine. Still, I maintained vigilance. I signed up for community safety workshops, talked about building infrastructure hazards. I consulted an architect friend who taught me about building inspections, crawlspace liability, tenant education. I became a hyper-aware tenant. But more importantly, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. Then something unexpected happened. I visited a fixer-upper open house, a mid-century cottage near a small lake. It had attic access too, but wired shut, and the owner provided documentation showing the only means of entry had been professionally sealed. I felt drawn. I toured it with care. I saw a sliding lawn, cozy kitchen with original tile. I imagined Milo napping in the sunroom. I imagined dinner gatherings, and for once I did not think about whistling sounds. 6 months of rent savings made me bold. I offered. The inspection came clean. Attic sealed, windows reinforced, no shared walls. I signed papers. I handed over keys to my duplex condo. It felt like shedding a second skin. That first night there, I cooked pasta and brewed wine, Milo at my feet. No locks to check, no whistling. Just the soft hum of fridge, occasional creak in new hardwood floors. I drank, smiled. In that moment, I reclaimed peace. I messaged Neil one last time, a terse note. "Your tenant situation resolved. I'm okay now. Hope the issue gets fixed for good." No anger. Closure. He replied briefly. "Glad you're safe. Good luck." I've since written a published article in a home safety journal. It's titled "When Walls Hide Threats: Attic Crawl Spaces and Occupied Security." I share my email, my experience with police, my outline of preventative measures. Camera installation, door sensors, landlord accountability. I've learned that healing happens in action, in shared warning, in procedural steps. I've rebuilt routines, nighttime meditation, keeping music playing softly, Milo curled at my feet, apartment locked from inside. No nightmares now, just dreams of drizzle on sidewalk, the water glistening under street lamps. No whistling. If I hear it in memory, I remind myself, I'm in a sealed house now. I have trusted neighbors. I have Milo. I have the ability to call, to alarm, to protect. I still occasionally outline the floor plans of old duplexes for curious readers, warning them, check for shared attic access. I speak at local workshops. I tell them, there was no weapon that night. Just the uncanny idea that someone was watching me, whistling a tune only they knew. And they nod, horror reflecting in their eyes. Piece by piece I rebuilt safety, not just external locks, but internal resilience. I learned fear doesn't disappear. It transforms when countered with knowledge and preparation. I learned trauma doesn't vanish. It softens when you take control of the narrative. In the aftermath of intrusion and fear, true safety is built not only through locks, cameras, or structural fixes, but through reclaiming your own agency. Sharing your experience gives others the tools to protect themselves. Awareness is power. Healing is an active process through vigilance, community, and turning fear into concrete knowledge that prevents harm. I moved to Pine Hollow in the early months of 2017, during the slow thaw of grief and burnout. My mother had passed that previous December after a long decline. Cancer, long hospital nights, the helpless waiting. After the funeral, I didn't return to my old apartment in Portland. I couldn't. Too loud. Too full of sympathy I didn't want and routines I couldn't face. So I drove west until the trees got taller and the roads narrowed, and I found myself at the end of Fairwood Lane, a cul-de-sac pressed against forest. The house I rented was modest. 2 bedrooms, a long driveway, and a shared wall with a unit the landlord assured me was empty. The property backed right into the woods, and if you opened the bathroom window, you could hear the pine branches shifting in the wind. It felt like a good place to disappear for a while. I spent my days editing manuscripts and my nights fixing up the interior, replacing dull bulbs and squeaky handles. Sometimes I'd walk the loop trail behind the neighborhood, where deer tracks crossed the dirt path. There were no kids playing outside, no block parties, just the occasional porch light and the rustling of leaves. Then one Saturday morning in late February, a moving truck backed into the driveway next door. She was the kind of person you notice not because she tries to stand out, but because something about her feels displaced. She wore jeans, boots, a flannel jacket that hung loose. Her auburn hair was tied back like she'd done it in a rush, and she looked like she'd been up all night. I brought over banana bread that evening, a clumsy nod to hospitality inherited from my mother. "Hey, welcome to Fairwood," I said, balancing the loaf on a plate. "I'm Elliot. I live next door." She hesitated, standing half in and half out of her cluttered living room. A mattress leaned against the wall and unopened boxes covered the floor. Finally, she stepped outside and smiled politely. "Rachel," she said, "just moved back after some time away." We didn't talk long. She mentioned a son, Dylan, 11, and said she'd grown up here before heading to LA. A return to roots, she called it. But she didn't seem rooted to anything. Over the next couple of weeks, I saw her more often, waving in the mornings as she walked Dylan to the school bus. Smoking on the back deck, eyes scanning the tree line. Once I helped her fix a jammed window. She brought me leftover lasagna the next day. We weren't friends, not exactly. But there was a quiet understanding between us, 2 people carrying things they didn't know how to set down. One night the power went out during a storm. A knock at my door startled me. Rachel, holding a flashlight. "Can I charge my phone?" she asked. "Yours still have power?" I let her in. We ended up talking for over 2 hours. Books, small-town oddities, and the way time stretches when you're alone. She stared out the window at the dark woods. "I don't sleep much," she said softly. "Something's out there. It's the dreams and this place." I keep thinking I told her Pine Hollow had always been a little eerie. She didn't laugh. Sometimes I wake up and swear I hear footsteps in the leaves, but when I check, there's nothing. Just quiet. And that makes it worse. I wanted to ask more, about Dylan, about her past, but I didn't. There was something guarded in her expression, like a window that only opened halfway. But things changed after that, gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. One night I was out on my porch when I saw someone standing at her window. A tall man, backlit, motionless. I blinked, thinking maybe it was a friend. The next day I asked her. "No," she said quickly. "No one's been over. I don't let people visit." I believed her. The following week, her blinds stayed closed. I didn't see her on the porch. I didn't hear Dylan. I knocked once, no answer. Called, left a note, nothing. Then came March 6th. I saw her at 5:45 p.m., barefoot, standing behind her screen door, eyes like hollow moons. "You okay?" I called out, walking up her porch steps. She didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, "He's back. He knows where I live now." Before I could ask anything else, she shut the door. That night I couldn't sleep. I heard crying through the wall, then whispering, then stillness. At 2:13 a.m. someone knocked on my door, fast, frantic. I jolted awake, ran to open it. No one, just wet footprints on the porch, bare feet, leading from her door to mine. I called the sheriff the next morning. They searched her place. I followed them inside, heart in my throat. It was empty, dust on the counters, blank walls, no furniture, no boxes, no signs of life. The deputy glanced around. "This place hasn't been lived in for years." I stared at him. "No, that's not right. I talked to her. We ate together. I saw her, just last night." He raised an eyebrow. "Two. Never solved." "Rachel Lynn Marin?" he asked. "She went missing back in 2013. Son, I didn't answer. I went home, opened my phone. Every message gone. Every photo I'd thought I'd taken of her garden. Empty frames, no metadata, nothing. But the banana bread plate sat clean on my counter, like it had never left. That night, I sat by the shared wall listening. A floorboard creaked. A whisper passed through the drywall, and I whispered back, just once. "I remember you." Sometimes I wonder what haunts a place more, grief that clings, or memories we try to bury. Rachel had never really come back. She'd never moved in, and maybe neither had I. But I keep that plate. And when the wind moves just right through the trees outside, I swear I hear a woman humming, something low, half sung, half remembered. Maybe she's still here, or maybe we both are. Some absences are louder than presence. The past doesn't always stay buried, especially in places where silence grows roots. We can't always explain what we've seen, but we can choose to remember, to speak softly into the dark when no one else will. Because sometimes, the only thing that keeps the forgotten alive is being remembered. Long before the basement, before the camera, before the whisper, I was just a girl trying to start over. I just turned 25 when I signed the lease on the duplex at 41 Orville Hollow. A narrow 2-story unit with a slanted porch and a crooked mailbox. It was cheap, quiet, and exactly what I needed, especially after my last place fell apart in every way possible. My ex-roommate Megan had spiraled hard into drinking, and when I tried to help, it only dragged me down. That whole year had been a blur of late-night fights, panic attacks, and feeling like a guest in my own life. So I moved. I packed everything I owned into a dented Honda Civic, left Philly behind, and drove west until the skyline softened and farmland gave way to empty streets. Lancaster felt quiet in the winter, lonely in a way I could live with. The duplex was old, worn around the edges, with a smell like rain-soaked wood and mothballs. The living room had cracked plaster and one leaning bookshelf that I swore would collapse in a strong breeze. Still, it was mine. All mine. I rented the front unit, 41A. The back unit, 41B, was occupied, but I never saw the tenant. My landlord, a sweet but stiff older woman named Doris, said, "He's quiet, keeps to himself. Ideal neighbor, really." That worked for me. I didn't want noise. I wanted stillness. I wanted to hear myself think again. The first 2 nights passed quietly. I graded student sketches from my art classes, drank too much chamomile tea, and listened to old jazz records my dad left me. I thought maybe, finally, this could be peace. Then the light came on. It was late, maybe 10:30. I was curled on the couch reading through a student's assignment when a faint glow caught the edge of my vision. The door to the basement was closed, but underneath it, a line of light spilled out like a warning. I stared at it, confused. I hadn't gone down there. I hadn't even opened the door since I moved in. I stood slowly, walked over, and opened it. Sure enough, the pull chain light was on, buzzing faintly. I stepped down 2 creaky steps and turned it off. Probably faulty wiring, no big deal. I went back upstairs, brushed my teeth, and got ready for bed. But an hour later, the light was back on. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called Doris and asked if maybe the basement was connected to the neighbor's side. She paused, then chuckled. "No, dear. The basements are sealed off. You've got your own. He doesn't even have a key to yours." That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I tried to reason it out. Maybe I'd forgotten to turn it off. Maybe a surge flicked it back on. Maybe I was still so wired from years of anxiety that I couldn't trust myself to remember anything clearly. I didn't want to make something out of nothing, not again. But that night when I turned the light off, twice, and still found it glowing again near midnight, I knew something was wrong. By the third night, I had accepted one thing. The light wasn't the only problem. It started around 10:30, a slow, dragging sound beneath the floor. At first, I thought maybe it was pipes or the furnace kicking on, but it wasn't consistent. It moved, from one side of the basement to the other, then silence, then a knock. It wasn't a bang, it was deliberate. Just one firm knock on the underside of the floorboards beneath the kitchen. It stopped me mid-step. I stood there barefoot, holding a half-washed plate in one hand, staring at the basement door like it might open by itself. I called my friend Josh. "Girl, you need to call the cops." What if it's nothing? I don't want to seem crazy." Josh paused. "Vanessa, you don't sound crazy. You sound scared. That's different." I didn't call the cops. I didn't want to report. I didn't want to be that tenant. Instead, I went to Walmart the next day and bought a $40 baby monitor with a cheap night vision camera and motion alert. That evening, I set it up downstairs, pointed it straight at the middle of the concrete floor. I left the basement light on. Maybe that would scare off whatever, or whoever, it was. By 10:38 p.m., I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the app and stopped breathing. There was a man, standing barefoot in the middle of the basement, thin, pale, wearing a torn gray shirt and jeans. His eyes stared straight into the camera, into me. My heart slammed into my ribs. 10 seconds later, he was gone. I locked every door and called 911. The police arrived fast. 2 cruisers. They swept the house, guns drawn. One of them, Officer Ramirez, came out of the basement shaking his head. "Nothing down there, ma'am. Just dust and a crawl space behind the furnace." "There were footprints," I whispered, "on the feed." He hesitated. There were footprints, bare feet, going into the crawl space, none coming out. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboard felt louder. Every shift in the wind felt like breath behind me. The basement door stayed shut, but the light didn't flicker anymore. It just stayed on, solid, waiting. I went back to Doris the next morning, knocked on her door instead of calling. She opened slowly, wearing a thick pink sweater and holding a cup of tea. "Vanessa," she said, voice low. "You okay? Did the last tenant ever mention anything strange in the basement?" Her face stiffened. Her hand tightened around the mug. "You didn't open the wall, did you?" she asked. "No. But the crawl space..." She looked past me like she didn't want to hear more. "The man before you," she said slowly, "claimed someone was sneaking into his unit, said the neighbor was getting in through the walls. I thought it was paranoia. He'd lost his job during the pandemic, wasn't well. What happened to him?" She didn't answer. "Doris," I pressed. "Did he hurt himself?" "No, but he left in the middle of the night. Didn't even ask for his deposit. Just gone." I walked home slower than usual, eyes scanning every basement window, every vent, every loose board. When I got back, I opened the camera app again. The feed showed the same empty basement, still, dusty. But something caught my eye in the corner. Scratches. On the support beam closest to the furnace, vertical lines grouped in fives. I went down to check them myself. They were real, deep enough to catch a fingernail. I backed away slowly, took a picture, closed the door and locked it. That night the motion alert came again at 10:38. But this time, there was no one in the frame, just the support beam. And new scratches. I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for him to come back. I was going to find out how he got in, or if he ever left. Maybe it was the panic, or maybe it was defiance, but I couldn't live in that house another night without knowing. The next morning I went to Home Depot and bought a flashlight, gloves, and a small crowbar. I waited until noon, full daylight, and went into the basement. The crawlspace door was just a warped plywood panel wedged behind the furnace. I pulled it loose with the crowbar and shined the flashlight inside. It was a tunnel, narrow, maybe 3 feet tall, dirt floor, wooden beams, and in the far end a bundle of cloth. I crawled halfway in before the smell hit me. Rot. I gagged, pulled my hoodie over my nose, and kept going. The bundle was a sleeping bag. Inside it were blankets, cans of soup, a small flashlight, and a spiral notebook. I backed out fast and ran upstairs. I flipped open the notebook on my kitchen table. Every page was covered in messy handwriting, repeated lines, fragmented thoughts. He's in the walls. They don't hear him. The light keeps him away. I have to stay awake. One page was different, more legible. It said, "If you find this, don't stay after 10:38. That's when he comes. The man who isn't alive." That night was the longest of my life. I didn't turn the monitor on. I didn't check the basement. I didn't try to be brave. I just waited. Fully dressed, backpack by the door, phone charged, keys in hand, watching the clock. At 10:38, the power flickered. Just once. Enough to make the lights dim and surge. Enough to make the air feel wrong. And then a whisper. Soft, garbled, almost electronic. "It's not your basement." That was it. I left. Didn't even lock the door behind me. I drove straight to my sister's house an hour away. Told her everything. She didn't laugh. Didn't question. Just let me crash in the guest room and sleep for 16 hours straight. The next day, I filed a report, showed the footage to another officer. He said the file was corrupted, nothing would play. But the image of that man, those eyes, was burned into my memory. I didn't go back for my things. I paid a service to collect them. I didn't talk to Doris again. Didn't ask if the next tenant had any problems. I didn't want to know. Now I live in a little town near Scranton. Still teach art, still get up early and check all the locks. I use floor lamps instead of ceiling lights. I don't live in places with basements. But sometimes around 10:30 at night when the wind hums against the window and the floor creaks just so, I feel it. Not fear, exactly. Something colder. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is ignore your instincts. Fear isn't always irrational. It can be a signal, a survival reflex honed over generations. Trust it. Listen to it. Because when you start to doubt your own reality, someone, or something, might be waiting to take advantage of that silence. When I first saw 9 Kellerman Street, it was mid-August. The sky was dusty with wildfire haze from the west, and the streets of Ithaca were strangely quiet. COVID had muted everything: traffic, chatter, movement. I remember thinking it felt like the world was holding its breath, which was fine by me. I needed quiet. I'd just ended a 7-year relationship that felt like bleeding from the inside out. Not loud or dramatic, just slow decay. We were 2 people who once shared everything but now didn't even share meals. By the time I moved out of our Brooklyn apartment, I was more relieved than heartbroken, but the silence that followed hit harder than I expected. My phone didn't buzz much anymore. No familiar footsteps in the kitchen. No warm voice saying, "You forgot your keys again." So I rented 3B, a sun-warmed third-floor walk-up in an old brick building that creaked when the wind blew too hard. It had charm. Slanted ceilings, chipped tile in the bathroom, and a clawfoot tub that filled too slowly. But it was mine, a space no one had ever yelled in, a place where I could sit on the fire escape and not hear someone criticize how I made my coffee. The landlord, Eric, was an older guy who managed everything from out of state. I'd never met him in person. Our lease was done via DocuSign, our conversations through text. The building was mostly empty. Students hadn't returned in full numbers yet, and some neighbors were stuck out of town. But Unit 2B wasn't empty. Caleb lived there. He introduced himself on my second day, soft-spoken, flannel shirt, carrying a bucket of tools. "Need a hand with that shelf?" he asked, gesturing toward the IKEA box on the stairs. I said yes, mostly because I was tired and he had kind eyes. We built the shelf in 15 minutes. He laughed when I said I couldn't work a power drill to save my life. "I've lived here longer than anyone," he said. "This place has its quirks. Pipes talk at night. Radiator groans like a haunted ship, but you get used to it." He seemed harmless, kind even. When a storm hit later that week, he knocked on my door with a flashlight and a spare candle. "Sometimes the power flickers," he said. "Just thought you should have a backup." I remember smiling, grateful. Back then, I didn't think twice about letting him in. By September, Caleb and I had developed a routine. We'd chat in the hallway on Sunday evenings. He'd pass along leftovers, soups, chili, one-time banana bread. I didn't ask too many questions. He lived alone, worked odd hours, and seemed to keep to himself. We were never romantic, but I let my guard down with him. After a year of emotional starvation, any attention felt like warmth. Then things began to feel different. It started with a note. "You shouldn't leave your window unlocked. Not safe around here." Typed. No signature. Left under my front door. It caught me off guard. I had left the window open the night before. And I live on the 3rd floor. Who else would know? I texted Caleb. "Was that from you?" He replied within seconds. "What?" The note. "Nope, but it's good advice." I wanted to believe him. Then I found boot prints in the hallway. Faint, muddy. I convinced myself I had tracked them in, even though I'd worn sandals that day. Then came the humming. Every night at exactly 12:12 a.m., I'd hear a low, rhythmic tune. Always the same melody, soft, like someone humming under their breath. It wasn't from above. I was the top floor. It felt like it came from within the walls. I texted Caleb again. "Hey, do the pipes hum or something?" He replied instantly, "Nope. That's your space up there. Whatever you hear, it's yours now." That line made me pause. What did that mean? It's yours now? A few days later, I stepped out of the shower and froze. My toothbrush was damp. I hadn't used it that day. I stood there dripping on the floor mat, staring at the sink like it had betrayed me. I started locking everything. The bathroom door, bedroom door, double-checking the deadbolt. I even wedged a chair under the knob at night, the way you see in thrillers. I stopped answering Caleb's knocks, stopped texting back. He left a Tupperware container outside my door. I never brought it in. Then I found the note, taped to the inside of my bedroom mirror. "You used to be friendlier." I stared at the handwriting. Not typed this time. Tight, deliberate penmanship, block letters. The tape was clear. The mirror hadn't been cracked. No forced entry. I called the landlord. "Eric, I'm really sorry to ask this out of the blue, but who lives in 2B? He paused. "What do you mean?" "The guy below me. Caleb. He helped me move in." He was quiet for a moment. "Leah." That unit's been empty since April. The last tenant moved to assisted living. What? I haven't rented it out yet. It's still vacant. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Are you sure? He said he's lived here for years. I don't know who that is. I've never had a Caleb listed. I left the next morning. No dramatic scene, no confrontation. I packed a duffel bag, grabbed my laptop, my wallet, and the notebooks I couldn't leave behind. I left the rest. Clothes, dishes, books, everything. I drove to Albany in silence. My sister didn't ask many questions. She just hugged me and made up the guest bed. That night, I finally slept. Not well, but at least uninterrupted. 3 days later, I got mail. No return address, no postage. Just a plain envelope slipped into my sister's mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note, shaky and smeared at the edges. You'll miss having someone watching out for you. No one else knows you like I do. You left the upstairs unlocked. That was the last time I heard from him. I called the landlord one more time, told him to change the locks, board up the windows, tear the place down if he wanted. I didn't care. I never went back. I still think about it sometimes. The way I let someone in without ever really asking who they were. How I let kindness blind me to what felt off. How loneliness made me easy to find. I'd like to believe Caleb was just a drifter, a squatter who knew how to slip between leases and hide in quiet places. But the truth is, I still don't know who or what he was. A neighbor, a watcher, something else entirely. There was never a Caleb listed on the lease, no record of him in the building registry. But someone lived below me. Someone cooked chili, hummed lullabies, and watched me brush my teeth through the crack in the door. And somehow, he got in. Now, wherever I live, I check behind the mirrors. I change the locks the first night. I keep windows shut tight no matter how hot it gets. I double-check basements and crawl spaces. I always ask the landlord, not just who lived there last, but who might still be there. Because kindness without boundaries isn't kindness, it's an invitation. And sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that know exactly when you need to feel seen. Not everyone who offers comfort has good intentions. Learn the difference between kindness and control. Pay attention to the small things. They're rarely small. It's funny how quiet you can make your life when you really want to disappear. After the custody hearing, I didn't want a fresh start. I wanted less. Less people, less noise, less of everything. So I took a short-term rental on the edge of town in Flagstaff, Arizona, at the tail end of West Ridge Road, where the asphalt turns to gravel and the houses get fewer, farther between. The house wasn't much. One story, stucco siding faded from years of sun, but the backyard opened into the edge of Coconino National Forest, and that meant no neighbors behind me. At least I thought that at the time. I worked remote IT for a logistics company. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me just enough flexibility to keep hoping my daughter Nora would come visit, even if the court order said otherwise. I kept her room ready anyway. Soft sheets, star decals on the ceiling, her favorite book still on the nightstand. A week after moving in, I met the neighbor behind me. I'd just come home from a grocery run, bags sagging in my arms, when I noticed a man standing at the shared fence. Late 30s, maybe early 40s, beard trimmed close, red flannel shirt, kind of guy you'd see working a weekend farmer's market. "Evening," he called out. "Dog okay with strangers?" I looked up. "Don't have a dog." He tilted his head, like I'd said something strange. "Huh. Guess I've been hearing yours bark every night." I laughed politely. "Definitely not mine." He just nodded and introduced himself as Warren. Said he'd lived in the house behind me for 5 years. "Mostly keep to myself," he added. "Don't worry, I'm not one of those nosy types." Except that he was. He showed up again the next afternoon, just there in my yard, standing by the lemon tree. I didn't even know I had a lemon tree until he plucked one off it. "You weren't gonna eat this, right?" he asked, grinning. I stared at him. Would have been nice to ask. He chuckled like we were sharing a joke, then walked off without another word. I should have said something stronger. I should have shut it down. But I didn't want trouble. Not with a custody case still fresh. Not with any reason for my ex to say I was unstable. Over the next few days, I caught him near my driveway. Once he stood there with his hands in his pockets, saying he'd seen a stranger near my window the night before. Said he'd kept watch. I thanked him cautiously, then checked my cameras that night. No strangers, just Warren. At 1:12 a.m., walking slow loops around my porch, pausing, looking in. I started locking both deadbolts every night after that. I told myself it was nothing, just a weird guy with poor boundaries. Arizona's full of them. But then the scratching started, every night around 2 a.m., sharp, desperate, like claws on wood. I'd get up and check, but there was never anything there. No dog, no raccoon, no prints in the dirt, just the sound, and sometimes the motion light flickering on. I checked the cameras again. Nothing. Not even Warren this time, just nothing. The kind of nothing that starts to make you wonder if maybe you're not sleeping as soundly as you think. On November 9th, a Saturday, Warren showed up soaked to the bone. I was out in the backyard checking on a loose fence post. No rain, not even clouds. Just him, shirt clinging to his back like he'd been dipped in a lake. "Sorry," he panted. "My dog jumped the fence again. Big one, tan coat, you seen him?" I stared at him. "Still don't have a dog," I said. "Never seen one back here." "You sure?" he asked. Same calm voice, but there was a weird tightness around his eyes. "He really likes your yard." I walked away, closed the back door, and that night, the scratching didn't come from the door. It came from beneath my bedroom window. Around 2:30 a.m., loud, slow, dragging sounds. I stood frozen in the hallway holding the baseball bat I kept in the closet. No cameras in that spot. Just wood siding and desert wind. I waited for morning. When the sun came up, I found 5 long gouges carved into the frame beneath my bedroom window. Not animal scratches. Too wide. Spaced like fingers. I called the sheriff's department. A deputy named Salinas came out. Polite, bored, took a report, asked some routine questions. When I mentioned Warren, something shifted in his tone. "You said your neighbor's name is Warren?" "Yeah, flannel shirt, little older than me, lives behind me." The deputy gave a slow nod. "That property's been empty since 2017. I blinked. "No, he's there, I've seen him. Previous tenant vanished, left his dog chained up out back. Tan mutt, big. We found him dead, starved." He adjusted his belt. Figured the guy skipped town. But if someone's back there now? He let the sentence trail off. I packed 2 days later, paid the last week in cash, and left without forwarding my mail. Whatever was going on with Warren, or whoever he really was, I didn't need to be around to figure it out. 3 weeks passed, then came the note. I found it tucked in with my forwarded mail. No return address. Just my name in careful block letters and a single sheet of paper inside. "You should have let him in, he still scratches, now you're the one who vanished." No signature, no explanation. Just those words, handwritten in blue ink. I called the landlord. He said no one named Warren had ever rented that house. The last listed tenant, Daniel Hobbs, had broken his lease after police found the dog. The house stayed empty due to some sort of zoning issue. The backyard fence was never repaired. I checked the local paper. There'd been a missing persons report. Daniel Hobbs, last seen November 12, 2017. The article mentioned mental health concerns and an unresolved custody battle. I looked again at the note. It wasn't just a threat. It was a message from someone like me. Someone whose grief had chewed a hole in his reality. And maybe, just maybe, something slipped through that hole and stayed. I moved back in with my sister for a while. I needed sleep. I needed to feel real again. But even there, the dreams followed. Dreams of scratching at the door. Dreams of footsteps around my bed. Dreams of waking up and seeing Warren standing by the window, just watching. I started seeing a therapist. I told him what I remembered, what I'd seen. I left out the supernatural parts, said I had a stalker. He nodded like it made sense. He told me trauma plays tricks, that loneliness becomes a lens. But the scratches were real. I still had the photos, and sometimes late at night when the desert wind kicks just right, I swear I can hear it again. A slow, dragging scrape on wood. Not like claws, like fingers. I drove back once. 6 months later, I told myself it was for closure, but really I just wanted to see if the house still stood. The rental sign was gone, the yard overgrown, no sign of anyone, except the back fence. There, carved into the wood in bold, deep slashes, were 5 lines, same width, same spacing, fresh. A neighbor I didn't recognize came out to smoke. I asked if anyone had moved into the house behind the fence. Hasn't been a tenant in years, he said, but sometimes, late at night, I hear barking. From the house? No. He pointed behind the rental. From your old yard. When grief isolates us, we don't always recognize what we invite in to keep us company. Pain distorts reality, and in the silence we seek, we might find something far darker waiting. Never ignore the signs, trust your instincts, and when someone or something keeps scratching at the door, don't let it in. Long before I ever saw Harold's face, I came to Asheville looking for quiet. Not silence, just quiet. After I lost my job, I floated for a while. I was working in publishing in Charlotte. Nothing glamorous, mostly educational materials and the occasional cookbook, but it was stable. Then came the layoffs, then my apartment lease ended, and then came the long stretch of what now? The worst of it wasn't the job loss. It was my mom. She passed in December. Brain tumor. It took her fast, but not fast enough to spare either of us the grief. 1 month we were laughing over Thanksgiving leftovers, and the next, I was holding her hand in a hospice room, pretending everything would be okay when we both knew it wasn't. I stopped writing after that, stopped doing most things. I coasted through winter, half asleep. By summer, I had sold most of what I owned, packed the rest in my car, and moved 2 hours west to a town with fewer memories. I found a modest place called Cedar Crest Apartments in Asheville. My new landlord told me it was mostly quiet. Some college kids on the first floor, retirees up top. I picked Unit 8C for the balcony, 3rd floor. It faced a stretch of trees and a small ridge behind the complex. I liked the idea of drinking tea out there in the morning, maybe journaling again, letting my cat, Juniper, watch the birds from a safe distance. The first 3 days were calm, unpacking, late-night frozen dinners, dust settling into corners. Juniper adjusted fast. Cats always do. I tried not to think about what came next. I was just glad to be out of Charlotte. Then came the wave from across the balcony. He was watering succulents on his side of the railing. Slim, maybe mid-50s, wore one of those faded flannel shirts that looked both comfortable and calculated. "You just move in?" he asked. "Yeah, Tuesday." "Welcome to the 3rd floor," he said with a smile. "I'm Harold, Unit 8D. Quiet, but not lonely if you don't want it to be." I nodded. "Thanks." The exchange was harmless, polite. I went back inside and forgot about it until the next morning when I found a note on my doormat. "Let me know if you need a hammer or a wine opener. I've got both. Harold." The note was handwritten, neat block letters. Something about it made me smile. It reminded me of a neighbor from my childhood who used to drop off candy canes at Christmas. I texted the number he left. "Thanks. Appreciate it. Still unpacking, but settling in." He responded within minutes. "You have the calmest cat I've ever seen. She watches everything like she's judging us all." That made me laugh. It felt normal, human. I didn't have many of those interactions lately. Over the next week, Harold proved to be helpful in small, neighborly ways. He told me where to get the best bagels in town, warned me about a local laundromat that ate quarters, Even left a small loaf of cornbread by my door with a sticky note. Warm it up, add butter. Trust me. I didn't eat it, but I appreciated the gesture. Then one morning I opened my front door and found him sitting on the top step with a thermos in his hand. "You should walk more," he said without looking at me. "Anything on TV?" "Sunrise on the ridge trail is better than I'll try," I replied. He glanced at me. "You don't sleep much." I stiffened. "Yeah, been a rough year." He nodded like he understood. "Rough years need witnesses." It was a strange thing to say, but something about it felt poetic, even comforting. Maybe it was just the kind of line a person throws out when they want to be remembered. At the time, I didn't realize he already knew too much. The first time I felt it, that shift from neighborly to off, was when the basil plant showed up. I'd just gotten back from a miserable interview and was kicking off my shoes when I noticed it sitting on the small bistro table on my balcony. A healthy little pot of basil. I hadn't bought it. At first I thought maybe the landlord had left it. Some welcome gift they forgot to mention. But there was no note. That evening, Harold texted me. "Saw you looked tired yesterday. Thought something green might help." I didn't reply. There was no malice in it, not on the surface. But the feeling in my gut shifted. He hadn't asked to leave it, and it wasn't left at the door. It was on the balcony where only I had access. The next morning I found him standing outside my sliding glass door. Not knocking, just there. At 6 a.m. When I pulled back the curtain, he startled me so badly I dropped my mug. "Sorry," he said calmly, not moving. "Thought I heard Juniper crying." "She was probably hungry. She does that," I said through the glass. He nodded. Still, sounded more upset than usual. I locked the sliding door after that. I started keeping all the blinds closed, but it didn't stop. Over the next week, I noticed little things. My tea box seemed lighter, like someone had been in it. The bathroom light would be on when I swore I'd turned it off. I found my laundry slightly rearranged in the basket. At first, I chalked it up to stress, maybe even sleepwalking. Then he started referencing things I never told him. "You know, I used to love Billie Holiday too. My mom would hum 'I'll Be Seeing You' when she cooked," and he said one night. I froze. That was my mom's favorite. He smiled, watering his plants. "Grief hides in the kitchen sometimes. I don't remember telling you that." He tilted his head. "Maybe not in words." That night I found a framed photo of me and my mom, one I hadn't touched in days, flipped face down on my dresser. The glass was cracked. I hadn't dropped it. No way. I started sleeping with the lights on. The next morning I confronted him. "Harold, have you ever been in my apartment?" He didn't flinch. "I think about it sometimes," he said softly. "But no, you'd know if I did." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But when I found my cat food moved to a different cabinet, one I never use, I realized something wasn't right. That was the beginning of the unraveling. By early September, I'd begun documenting things, dates, times, odd occurrences. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern. I'd wake up with the distinct feeling something had been moved. A door that creaked a little wider, a drawer not quite shut. Juniper, who once slept like a rock, now hissed at shadows near the windows. One night I found a small sticky note on the inside of my balcony door. I hadn't opened that door in days. The note said, "You keep asking if I've been in, but I've always been here. You're the one who disappears." I stood frozen for a full minute, the air suddenly thick. I didn't move until Juniper rubbed against my leg and meowed. The next morning, I called the building manager. "I have some concerns about my neighbor," I said carefully. "Which unit?" 8D. She sighed. "Harold, you've gotten complaints before?" "Not exactly, just one woman. She lived in your apartment before you. Moved out pretty suddenly last fall. Never said why." "Was it because of Harold?" There was a long pause. "She didn't say. Just asked to be released from her lease early. Paid the penalty. Moved out within 48 hours. Left behind her coffee table and 2 shelves. Seemed like she was in a rush. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I checked all my locks again. I even pushed furniture in front of the door like I was preparing for a storm. I tried to tell myself I was being ridiculous. Harold was strange, sure, but he hadn't actually done anything. Then Juniper disappeared. It was early evening. I'd just gotten back from the grocery store. I opened the door and she didn't come to greet me like usual. I called her. Nothing. I searched the apartment for 3 hours. Every room, every cabinet, behind the fridge, under the sink. I checked the front door. It was still locked from the inside. No sign she'd gotten out. Panic set in. Around 2:15 a.m., I heard soft scratching at the sliding glass door. When I pulled the curtain aside, Juniper was sitting on the balcony railing, staring across the way. I opened the door slowly. She didn't move. She just kept looking. Not at me, but directly into Harold's window. He was standing there, barely visible, unmoving, just inside the glass. "I think she wanted to visit," he said, his voice muffled but audible. I didn't say a word. I scooped Juniper into my arms and shut the door. That was it for me. I packed the next day. Everything I could fit in the car. Clothes, Juniper's carrier, my laptop, 2 photo albums. I left the furniture, left the dishes, the cornbread in the freezer, the cursed basil plant. I left the keys on the kitchen counter and walked out. No goodbye, no explanation. The landlord called once about rent. I didn't answer. I paid the remaining balance online and never looked back. I drove to Nashville in a single stretch, radio off the entire way. Now I live on the 2nd floor of a newer building. No balconies, no shared stairwells. I picked a place with indoor hallways and a front desk. Somewhere safe. Somewhere anonymous. I don't keep plants anymore. Juniper adjusted quickly. She's back to sleeping at the foot of my bed. Back to her usual judgmental stare. But sometimes, late at night, I'll wake to her hissing at the window. Her ears flat, her eyes locked on something I can't see. And sometimes, I hear it too. A faint whistle, a melody I can't place, except I can. It's what Harold used to hum when watering his plants. I didn't tell anyone the whole story for months, not until a new friend asked why I left Asheville so suddenly. I gave a watered-down version at first. Bad energy, creepy neighbor, too much grief in that apartment. But I think the truth matters. Harold never broke in. He never laid a hand on me. That's what makes it so slippery, so hard to explain. But he was inside, in ways that mattered. Through a cracked door, an unlocked balcony, through quiet observations that became control. He knew things he shouldn't have known. Details I never shared. Grief makes you vulnerable. Loneliness, even more so. And Harold, he watched for that. He waited. Sometimes danger doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it comes with cornbread, a warm smile, and a potted basil plant. And you don't realize what's happening until your world feels smaller, tighter, like the walls are breathing with someone else's rhythm. When I think back now, I realize how quickly my space stopped feeling like mine. How easily small kindnesses became surveillance. How quickly helpful became controlling. That's the kind of harm people don't always believe. But I do. I lived it. The body often senses what the mind tries to rationalize. If something feels wrong, even if it isn't overt, listen. You don't need to justify your boundaries to anyone. Safety isn't always about locked doors. It's about protecting your sense of peace, your autonomy, yourself. Some people don't need to break in. They wait for you to let them in bit by bit until your home no longer feels like yours. Leave, even if you can't explain it to others. Even if they don't believe you. You don't need permission to feel unsafe. They said healing would look like a step forward, that it would feel like a fresh breath, that I'd wake up one day and know it was time to come back to life. But healing isn't that clean. It looks like sitting in a quiet apartment on a second-hand couch surrounded by unopened boxes, pretending the silence is peace and not just the absence of someone's laugh you'll never hear again. That's how it was when I moved into Unit 14B at Mapleview Apartments. It was a basic one-bedroom, small kitchen, beige carpet that carried the scent of someone else's air freshener. But it was cheap, near campus, and the landlord said the building was older but solid. I was trying to finish the graphic design program I'd abandoned the semester after my brother Caleb died. I picked 14B because it only had one neighbor, 14A. I liked the idea of fewer people, less chance of awkward elevator rides or being seen coming home teary-eyed after therapy. I didn't meet the neighbor right away, I only heard him. It started with faint jazz drifting through the wall late at night, like old records, the kind that crackle between the horns. I didn't mind it. I'd lie in bed and let the music wrap around me easier than silence. Eventually I'd hear coughing, soft, like someone trying not to disturb. Sometimes a shuffle of feet. Then one night a soft knock came from the wall behind my bed. Not loud, just 2 taps. "Hey, you okay over there?" I sat up, startled. I didn't respond at first. Then the voice came again, warm, a little amused. "This building echoes, huh?" I cleared my throat. "Yeah, sorry, just couldn't sleep." Me neither. That was it. The first real human interaction I'd had in weeks that didn't feel forced. His voice made the apartment feel less hollow. The next night, I said hi first. We started talking, through the wall. His name was Elliot. Lived in 14A for a while. Said he used to be an architect, used to design cozy cabins up north. His voice was low, tired but calm, gentle. He asked about school and I told him I'd dropped out for a bit. Told him about Caleb, about how I couldn't draw for months after the funeral. He didn't fill the silence with pity, just said how to remember things. Loss does that. I used to draw too. Only way I knew, I remember crying a little after that. Quietly. He didn't comment on it, just played a slow Coltrane track through the wall the rest of the night. A few weeks in, Elliot slipped a note under my door. It was a pencil sketch of my window, annotated with insulation tips. "You'll save money on heating if you layer plastic behind the curtain," it read. "Better sleep too." I smiled. Drew a little thank you cartoon on the back and slid it under his door. This became our thing. Notes, sketches, messages on scraps of notebook paper. I started drawing again. Small stuff at first. Leaves, buildings, the view from the kitchen window. Then one night I heard the voice again. "You're good," Elliot said, to feel. "Your lines have rhythm." Like someone who's trying to remember how that one stuck with me. The next morning I found my fridge magnets rearranged. I didn't think much of it until I looked closer. They spelled something. "You should leave." I laughed, nervously, probably a dream. Maybe I sleepwalked. Maybe I'd done it to myself during a bad night and forgotten. But then came the dreams. One in particular. Elliot's voice at my bedroom door, whispering my name, over and over. I woke up sweating. The wall was quiet. That day, I found a note on the floor. It wasn't one I remembered dropping or receiving. It said, "Sometimes I forget which side I'm on." It was around mid-March when the noises changed. I heard the usual music, the cough, the quiet tap against the wall. But then one night, I heard something in the apartment, not beside it. Footsteps in the kitchen. I held my breath, grabbed my phone, sat upright with the cover still over me. I didn't move for 10 minutes. Then I got up and checked. Door was locked, windows locked, nothing taken. But on the tile floor were muddy footprints, faint, but definitely there. I snapped a picture. The next morning I texted the landlord. She assured me only I had access. The locks were changed at move-in. I asked her if anyone might have a spare key. "No, and you're the only tenant on that side of the building now. Unit A's been vacant for a while." I stared at that message for a long time. That evening I tapped the wall. "Elliot?" No answer. "Hey, I know this is weird, but has anyone ever gotten into your place before?" Anyone messed with your stuff? Silence. Then, Jordan, I haven't lived here in a long time. I froze. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? But the wall stayed quiet. I didn't sleep that night. I called the property manager the next morning, told her I needed clarity. She looked up the records. There's no Elliot listed on your floor, she said, confused. You said Unit A? Yeah. That's been vacant since 2019. She stopped. I waited. Why? After the tenant passed, alone, natural causes, he left journals, letters, most of them addressed to someone named Jordan. I couldn't breathe. I went next door, knocked, no answer. I pulled a thin toolkit from under my sink and picked the lock. I'd learned how during a class project, oddly enough. The door opened easily. The air was still. Dust covered the floor. No furniture. But in the center of the room was a stained mattress. The wall facing mine was covered in deep, chaotic scratches. On the floor near the wall, a pile of sketches. My sketches. Drawings I'd made over the last few weeks. But older, copied, slightly distorted, like someone had memorized them from the other side of the drywall. I backed out of the unit, locked the door, and didn't step back in. I moved out within a month. The landlord didn't fight me on breaking the lease. Maybe she'd heard something too. Maybe she saw the look in my eyes when I handed over the keys. My next apartment was newer, brighter, more modern. But I stopped talking to neighbors. I stopped drawing anything I hadn't already dreamed about first, and I still don't sleep facing the wall. Sometimes I wake up in the early hours, heart racing, and think I hear a voice through the sheetrock. A low hum, a familiar cough. Just once, last month, I thought I saw the fridge magnets move on their own, but I didn't check. I just pulled a chair up against the wall and waited for morning. Loneliness will make you reach out, and in the dark, something will reach back. Not every connection is meant to heal you. Some just want to keep you close. Listen closely to what the silence says, and if a voice starts whispering through the walls, ask yourself, is it coming from grief or something that feeds on it? I didn't leave Portland because I wanted to. I left because staying meant slowly disintegrating inside four walls that used to hold a life. After Claire died, the apartment didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a holding cell, one with familiar shadows, her lingering perfume on scarves, her toothbrush still in the cup because I couldn't bring myself to toss it. I used to be a writer. Mid-list novels. Nothing flashy, but enough to scrape by and earn me a loyal, if modest, readership. But grief shut everything down. I stared at blank pages for months. My publisher stopped asking about the next manuscript, and friends gave me space, the kind they think is kind but feels like vanishing. In March, my therapist suggested leaving town. Grief needs air, she said, not confinement. She handed me a printed listing for a rental deep in rural Oregon, Pine Hollow, a little green house at the end of a nearly forgotten road. Cheap, remote, and available through June. I booked it for 6 months. When I arrived at 49B Cypress Road, the trees were tall and thick, like watchful sentinels, leaning just enough to feel present. The house sat 100 feet off the gravel road, its paint faded but intact. The air smelled like pine needles and damp earth. It was beautiful in the way loneliness can be. Wide, untouched, and still. My landlord, Ramona, had left the key in a lockbox beside the door. No in-person greeting, just a sealed envelope with rules. One stood out. Leave the fireplace flue open, even when not in use. Odd, but I didn't think much of it. The first few nights were uneventful. I unpacked slowly, read some old paperbacks, let silence fill the space where Claire's voice used to be. No cell service, spotty Wi-Fi. And I thought, maybe this was what healing looked like. Quiet, slow, detached. Until I met the neighbor. It was around day 3. I was on a ladder, clearing leaves from the gutter when I saw a figure at the edge of the trees. He didn't approach at first, just stood there like he'd been carved from the woods themselves. Eventually, he stepped into the clearing. "You're the writer," he said flatly. Not a question. "Yeah, just trying to get out of the city for a while." He wore a beige cardigan and pants that looked like they belonged to a different decade. His hair was neatly parted, his face calm, expression unreadable. "I'm Kenneth. Next door. 47. He pointed vaguely into the woods where I could barely make out a sloped roof through the trees. "This road used to have 6 houses," he said. "Now it's just us." "Quiet out here," I said, trying to sound polite. "There's a rhythm to it," he replied. "Some people mistake it for loneliness." We stood in that strange silence for another moment. "If you get cold," he said, "my wife used to keep extra firewood. I can bring some over." "That's kind of you," I said, "but I've got enough for now." He stared for just a second longer than necessary. She wouldn't want the house next door to freeze. That night I found a thermos of black coffee on my porch. A folded note sat beneath it. "For your early mornings, KW." I didn't hear him drop it off. I started waking up earlier than usual. The house had that sort of stillness that seeped under your skin. At 5 a.m., the fog outside looked like it was alive, moving slow and heavy through the trees, pressing itself up to the windows. I found myself drinking that porch coffee even though I didn't remember craving it. Kenneth came around more often. He never knocked, just appeared, at the edge of the trees or at the end of the gravel path, hands in his pockets. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he just stood there watching the house like it was telling him something. One Sunday I decided to return the gesture. I baked banana bread, wrapped it in foil, and walked the short trail to 47. His mailbox leaned sideways on a cracked post. The gravel path bent around 2 towering firs, revealing a home nearly swallowed by forest. Curtains drawn, no movement. When I knocked, I heard the latch turn slowly. Kenneth opened the door in that same beige cardigan. Behind him, the interior was dim. No lamps on. Just shadows and the faint outline of a hallway lined with picture frames, all facing away. "Thought I'd return the favor," I said. "Banana bread." He took it with both hands. "Thank you. My wife used to make it." "Do you live alone now?" "She passed," he said, voice steady. "But her routines never left." He paused. "You can come in if you'd like." Something in me, instinct maybe, told me not to. "Maybe another time," I replied. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on my back. When I reached my own porch, I turned to glance behind me. He was still standing in the doorway, watching. The oddities began to stack up. First was the bird, a dead robin placed carefully on my porch one morning. Its wings were extended as if it had been arranged. No blood, no signs of trauma, just stillness. Then the power went out. No storm, no outage reports. The wiring in the area, Kenneth said later, was old and restless. His exact words. By mid-May, I couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something off about the house. It didn't creak like normal houses. It sighed. It pulsed. Sometimes the windows fogged from the outside. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and swear it had gotten smaller. And then came the carvings. I was walking the forest edge when I found a trail of small wooden figures, lined neatly on a fallen log. A woman sitting with her hands folded, a man writing at a desk. A third, unmistakably, was me. Same build, same messy hair, even the puffy coat I wore. I didn't touch them. But that night I dreamed of being watched. And when I woke up, the house felt heavier. After the figurines, I kept my curtains closed. Something about being seen without knowing it had started to gnaw at me. The forest didn't feel neutral anymore. It felt like it knew me. Like the house wasn't isolated, but observed. Like I was being measured, like grief was being cataloged. I tried to focus on normal routines. Wake up, coffee, a walk, journal entries, no fiction. Not yet. But sometimes I scribbled lines like, This place doesn't want healing. It wants company. One night in late May, I stayed up late watching an old movie on my laptop. Around 2:20 in the morning, just as I was thinking about heading to bed, there was a single knock at the front door. Just once. Sharp. Not frantic, not hesitant, like someone knocking because they had a reason. I froze. No footsteps. No second knock. I waited a full minute before standing up and walking to the door. I opened it slowly. No one was there. But beneath the doormat something was tucked. A slip of paper, yellowed and thin. The house hates silence. You should write something again. I stood there for a long time, barefoot in the cold, eyes sweeping the dark yard, waiting for a movement I wouldn't be able to explain. Nothing came. But the note knew things. I hadn't written since Claire passed, not one word of fiction, and I had told no one that. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, light on, waiting for morning. At dawn, I took Juniper, my old travel typewriter, and stuffed it in a box. Then I walked through the house and unplugged everything. It didn't feel like protection. It felt like buying time. Around noon, I walked over to Kenneth's. He opened the door almost instantly. "Have you been leaving things at my place?" I asked, trying to sound calm but firm. He didn't deny it. "Sometimes people need nudging," he said. "That note last night. How did you know I haven't been writing?" He looked me dead in the eye. "Because that house only whispers to the silent, the ones who don't make noise anymore. My wife, she believed homes carry memory. That pain lingers. You think you came here by accident? What does that mean?" He stepped outside, onto the porch, a little closer than I wanted him to be. "Pain finds its match," he said. "People. The house draws grief. It listens. It watches. It likes broken." I backed away. "I'm not broken," I said. He didn't argue. He just gave me the kind of smile you give someone when you know something they don't. I decided to leave that day, called Ramona, the landlord, and offered to pay through the end of my lease if she'd let me go early. She agreed. No questions, no concern. Just a short "sure, that's fine," over a scratchy phone line. Packing was fast. I didn't have much to begin with, just a couple of suitcases, my laptop, and a stack of Claire's old books I couldn't part with. The forest felt denser that morning, like the air itself was trying to keep me from moving. I ignored it. When I opened the trunk of my car, I heard it. A distant, rhythmic knocking. 3 beats, a pause, then again. I turned toward Kenneth's place, but the house looked still. No sign of movement, no sound from the woods. I drove away just after dawn. As I turned off Cypress Road, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Kenneth stood by his mailbox. He waved, and in his other hand, held casually like a cup of coffee, was a wooden figurine. Me. But this time, I was seated at his dinner table. I've been back in Portland for a few months now. Re-entered therapy, reconnected with a couple of friends. No one really asked what happened in Pine Hollow. Most assumed I just needed space. I haven't written a single new story, not because I don't want to, but because I'm afraid of what will happen when I do. I hear things at night, small things, like tapping behind the walls. I live in a 3rd-floor apartment. I've checked, there's nothing behind those walls. And sometimes letters arrive, no return address, handwritten, 1 sentence per envelope. "The house still remembers you." I burn them, but I know more will come. I've started dreaming of the carved version of myself, seated, smiling, staring across a long wooden table in a house I never owned. He looks peaceful, settled, as if he finally belongs. That's what scares me most, because part of me wants to go back. Grief is not just something you carry. Sometimes it carries you, to places, to people, to decisions that make no sense until it's too late. Vulnerability doesn't always scream. Sometimes it walks silently into strange homes and calls it healing. But not every quiet place is meant for recovery. Some places are hungry. Learn to recognize when a setting is reflecting your pain, not helping it. And above all, don't don't romanticize isolation, because sometimes the silence isn't just yours. When I moved into Bellevue Residences in downtown Chicago, I thought I was escaping my past. The broken engagement, the awkward questions from friends and family, the dread of explaining again why I'd called it off. A 14-story building overlooking the city offered distance, from pain, from people, and maybe from myself. I'd rented Unit 14F, a modest one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the skyline. Inside, double locks, a secure lobby, and silence. Real silence. Something I hadn't had since my engagement fell apart. No paper-thin walls full of arguing neighbors, no smells wafting from other kitchens. Just peace. That's what I needed. I didn't meet many neighbors at first. Packages came and went. Maintenance visits were minimal, and I settled into a quiet routine. Dinner, a glass of wine, early nights on the couch with my cat, Daisy. I started a new job remotely, editing content for a tech company, and found comfort in the predictability of words and schedules. Then I met Simon in the mailroom. He lived in 14D, 2 doors down. Handsome in a reserved way, clean-shaven, neatly dressed, early 40s, calm demeanor. "You're new," he said, offering a small wave. "14F, right? Elena?" I froze, startled. "Yeah. How'd you—" "Lobby security mentions names sometimes. Not creepily, just neighborly," he replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. That greeting felt odd, but I nodded and made myself small. The day I hadn't known people knew my name. Big buildings change people. Over the next few days, Simon seemed everywhere I was. If I dropped something in the hallway, he'd be there before I bent down to pick it up. If a package arrived, he'd text me, "Hey, I brought your Amazon box up. Went to the wrong floor at first, sorry." Once, around 11 p.m., I accidentally burned toast. A minute later, there was a knock on my door. I smelled smoke. "Just checking you're okay," he said softly when I answered in slippers. He always said, "Just checking." That phrase began to echo in my mind. I told myself I was paranoid. Maybe I'd never encountered someone so consistently attentive. Maybe kindness was allowed, but something underneath the kindness felt hollow. Things escalated subtly. On one evening, I returned from a work dinner to find Simon standing near the corner of the building entrance. "You didn't tell me you were out," he said, as if that was his business. "I didn't say where I was," I replied. "Lucky guess which restaurant?" He shrugged. He didn't ask how I'd know. That unsettled me. A week later, I found packages I hadn't ordered: a silk robe, a scented candle, a wine opener. Each item was addressed to me. No note, no indication who sent them. The concierge said they came from someone in the building. I confronted Simon quietly in the hallway. "Did you send those?" The robe was size small. He looked genuinely puzzled. "I thought maybe you had a secret admirer," he said. "Not me. Promise." But how could he know the size? That robe was identical to one I had thrown away only weeks earlier. No one else could have known. One night, he knocked unexpectedly, holding soup in a Tupperware container. "You mentioned last week you weren't feeling great. I made chicken and rice." His voice was soft. "No expectations, just thought you might appreciate it." I accepted it out of politeness, but that night I locked both bolts and placed a chair under the doorknob. I slept with the lights on. By now I'd sensed something wrong. This stalker-like neighbor who always seemed too available, too informed, too involved. A week later, my internet stopped working. At first I thought it was the router. I unplugged it, restarted it. Nothing. No outages were reported. Every other device worked. I checked the hallway, lights on. I texted Simon, half out of habit, half because I was frustrated. "Hey, is your Wi-Fi working? Mine just cut out." He responded within minutes. "Mine's fine. You can use mine if you want. I think I still have your device saved." My stomach dropped. I'd never connected to his Wi-Fi, never shared my password. I hadn't even told him the name of my network, and yet here he was, suggesting he'd saved my device. I didn't respond. The next morning, I visited the front desk and asked the building manager if there were security cameras in the hallways. She offered a distracted smile. "There used to be, but not since the remodel last year," she said, checking something off a clipboard. "Why? Something happened?" I shook my head, just wondering. I spent that night in bed scrolling through articles on privacy, Wi-Fi spoofing, router cloning. I didn't understand half of it, but the pattern was clear. Someone with enough knowledge could easily monitor traffic, devices, even copy network names. I hadn't secured mine. I hadn't changed the factory password. It was like leaving my front door wide open. Later that night, I noticed a shadow move across the tiny gap between my blinds. I turned off all the lights and waited. Nothing. Silence. But I couldn't sleep. The next day, I reached out to my brother in California. It was the first time I told someone everything. "Why didn't you call sooner?" he asked, voice low but tight. "This guy's not being helpful. He's testing how far he can push it. Elena, you need to get out of there." "But I don't have proof. I can't accuse." "You don't need proof to protect yourself. If you're scared, trust that." I put in a 1-week notice to break the lease. It cost me a month's rent, but I didn't care. My sanity wasn't for sale. That night, Simon knocked. I didn't answer. He knocked again, soft and persistent. Then came the note, slipped under the door in silence. "It's strange. I thought we were becoming good neighbors. I kept everything gentle, respectful. But now you're running?" No signature. Just those words in small, clean handwriting. The exact same script that had been on the card attached to the robe. I didn't sleep the final night in 14F. I sat on the couch with a mug of tea I didn't drink, lights off, Daisy curled in my lap. I listened for movement. A creak, a knock, anything that might suggest Simon was out there. Around 3:15 a.m., I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, pausing near my door. Then a sound like someone dragging their hand lightly across the surface, fingertips across wood. I stood frozen, not breathing. The sound passed. In the morning, I packed what I could into 2 duffels, loaded my car, and handed the keys to the front desk without looking back. The new place was a shared house in Wicker Park. 3 roommates, 1 bathroom, and 0 skyline views. I told myself I didn't care. I didn't want views. I wanted presence. Footsteps I could explain. Noise I could place. My roommates were loud, unfiltered, messy. They laughed too much and didn't knock on bathroom doors. It was perfect. But the fear lingered. I changed all my passwords. I stopped using public Wi-Fi. I bought a basic firewall and learned more about router security than I ever thought I'd need to. I even got a little camera to point at my front door, just in case. A few weeks after the move, a padded envelope arrived at my new address. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. I threw it away without plugging it in, and for weeks nothing happened. Then one night I walked home from work and noticed a man across the street. Tall, familiar posture, standing too still. Watching. He didn't follow, just stood there, then turned away into the dark. That was the last time I saw him. But every now and then, I think about that soup, that robe, that candle that smelled exactly like the one I once bought on a random trip with my ex. It wasn't affection, it was rehearsal. He had been rehearsing a version of my life, building it inside his own apartment, learning me gesture by gesture. The new place should have felt like a fresh start. In some ways it was. The creaks and clatter of a lived-in house replaced the sterile hush of Bellevue's high-rise hallways. One of my roommates, Maya, was a grad student who played sad indie music too loud. The other, Jackie, worked night shifts and talked in her sleep. I started leaving my bedroom door cracked open again. Slowly, I let myself feel safer. But Simon lingered, not in form, but in residue. Every unfamiliar knock made me flinch. If someone said my name before I introduced myself, my chest tightened. I re-examined every online account, Googled my name just to see what was out there. I even deleted my LinkedIn. About a month after moving, I was walking home from the train station when I saw something that stopped me cold. There, pinned to the corkboard outside a coffee shop, was a missing cat flyer. Hand-drawn, amateur-looking. The cat didn't look like Daisy, but the handwriting? It was his. Same tight loops, same way of over-dotting the lowercase e's. No phone number, no contact, just the flyer. It could have been nothing. Or it could have been a whisper. I still know where you are. That night I told my roommates everything. The robe, the router, the knock at 3:15 a.m. I expected disbelief, maybe polite sympathy. But Jackie just leaned back and said, "Yeah, I had a guy like that once. Watched me through a peephole he drilled behind my mirror. Nobody believed me until he got caught doing it to someone else." Maya just nodded. Creeps aren't always strangers. It didn't make me feel better, but it did make me feel less alone. After that, we set up boundaries as a house. Group texts if anyone was home alone. A shared calendar so no one felt ambushed by strangers coming or going. For the first time since I moved out of Bellevue, I felt like I was part of a small, sturdy tribe. I still had the robe, tucked deep in a storage bin I hadn't unpacked. I didn't know why I kept it. Maybe to remind myself it had all been real. That it wasn't just paranoia, that it had edges and fabric and weight. But some nights, I thought about burning it. One morning I woke up to find a small envelope taped to the front door of the house. No address, no postage. Inside was a single piece of paper with 3 words. I read everything. I sat down on the steps trying to catch my breath. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a weather alert. I deleted it. My body felt distant, disconnected. I didn't call the police. What would I say? That my ex-neighbor, someone who had never technically harmed me, might be following me across a city of 3 million people? Instead, I changed my phone number. I shut down every social media account that used my full name. I blocked half the city from seeing me online. I even swapped my router again. But healing wasn't about gadgets and locks. It was about the part of me that had started to believe maybe I deserved to be watched, that maybe I had asked for attention by being visible, being friendly. That was the real cost. Simon didn't just invade my space. He made me doubt my own instincts. And that's what scared me most. The truth is, I will probably never know how much he knew, or how far it went. I will never know if he was inside my apartment, or just next to it. Whether he guessed my favorite wine or found a way to read my emails. But I know the feeling of being observed, of being prepped for, of someone deciding they know you better than you know yourself. Months passed. One summer afternoon, Daisy sat in the window, watching a man walk by. For a moment, my breath caught, but it wasn't him. Still, I moved away that fall, out of Chicago completely, to a smaller city where I could start fresh under a different name at work, in a neighborhood where I wasn't the only one walking alone at night, where my windows faced other windows, and I could wave to neighbors without suspicion. Sometimes I still feel watched, but now I know how to notice. I know the signs. I know that quiet isn't always safe, and that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. We are taught to be polite, to be receptive to kindness, but not all kindness is honest. Sometimes it masks control, obsession, or the hunger to possess. It's okay to say no. It's okay to trust your gut when something feels off, even if you can't explain why. You don't owe anyone access just because they offered help. Protecting your peace doesn't make you rude. It makes you safe. The morning I pulled into Redwood Terrace, it felt like I was stepping into someone else's life. Clean sidewalks, perfect hedges, houses so alike you could close your eyes and count steps between them. I liked that. Predictability. I'd spent too many years buried in chaos, a father who drank, a mother who gave up trying to fix him, a string of foster homes when things finally fell apart. I learned not to attach, not to expect people to stay or care. I was 31 when I finally left the town where I grew up. Took a job as a remote copy editor in Colorado, packed everything I owned into my Civic, and signed a lease on Unit 9 at Redwood Terrace. It wasn't fancy, but it had white walls, a skylight, and a little fenced yard with a dying rosemary bush. It felt like mine, and I needed something to be mine for once. I didn't expect a welcome. I didn't want one. But the first day, as I was dragging a box of books inside, I heard a soft voice behind me. Banana muffins. Still warm? She held out a tray wrapped in cloth. Mid-60s, gray bob, pale pink cardigan. She had the look of someone who always remembered birthdays. "I'm Dana. I live in 8. I've been waiting for you." That threw me. "Oh?" I smiled politely. "The property manager told you someone was moving in?" She tilted her head, eyes gentle. "No, I just knew." I thanked her, told her I'd return the dish, and went inside. At first I wrote it off as quirky, small-town charm, but it didn't stop there. Dana waved to me every morning, not from the porch like a normal neighbor, from her upstairs window. I'd open my curtains and there she'd be, smiling, sometimes holding a coffee cup like she'd been waiting for me to wake up. It was always just long enough to notice, never long enough to accuse. She started finishing my sentences when we spoke. "Oh, big deadline today, huh? Bet you're doing laundry tonight. You always do Thursdays." I never told her those things. I chalked it up to coincidence. I had a routine. Maybe she noticed. People notice things when they're bored. Then came the tea invitation. I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to seem rude either. Her living room smelled like lemon oil and cinnamon. Cozy, almost staged. We sat with our cups and talked about nothing until my eyes landed on a photo above the fireplace. A girl, late 20s, brown hair pulled back, soft eyes. Something about her mouth, on the edge of a smile. "She was my daughter," Dana said. "Melissa." I froze. That's my name." She nodded, her eyes shining. I just knew. It had to mean something. "I know. When the landlord said a Melissa had signed the lease, I tried to smile, but something shifted in my gut. The room felt smaller. The next morning, I found a gift bag on my porch. Inside, a soft green sweater, a delicate gold locket, and a handwritten note. It was hers. "I think you'd look beautiful in it." I stood there on my doormat, heart thudding. I didn't take it inside. I walked it straight back to her door and knocked. When she opened it, she looked so expectant. "Dana," I said quietly. "I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept these. I'm not her." Her smile didn't falter. "You are her. You just don't remember yet." That night, my books were rearranged. The mystery novels had been moved to the bedroom. The teacups, I always kept them in the bottom cabinet, were now above the sink. I lived alone. I locked my doors. Nothing was broken, but someone had been inside. Then came the shampoo. I only use unscented brands, always have. Suddenly there was lavender in my shower, the exact kind I used to hate in high school. The toothbrush I bought last week, replaced with another, soft bristled, like I used before I switched. One morning, I unlocked my phone to check the weather. My lock screen had changed. It showed Dana and me sitting in her living room, smiling. I never took that photo. I went over again, this time angry. "Stop this," I said at her door. "You've crossed every line." She didn't look surprised, just sad. She was kind like you, and quiet. She read the same books. She walked the same way. Don't you see it? "She died, Dana." "I know," she whispered. "Car crash. Coming home from the airport. She called me when she landed, said she'd be home by 10. She never made it." I swallowed the knot in my throat. That's not me. But she stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. "You need to come home." Her grip was stronger than I expected. Her nails dug into my skin. I yanked free and backed away, breathing hard. That night, when I came back from the store, the door was unlocked. Everything looked normal. But on my nightstand, next to my book, was a photo frame. Inside it, a picture of me, asleep in bed. I left the next morning. Didn't shower, didn't eat. Packed a duffel bag and drove straight to a friend's place in Denver. I reported it, filed a complaint. But there was no damage, no stolen property, no video footage. The police said unless I had proof of forced entry or threats, there wasn't much they could do. Dana hadn't broken any laws, just reality. A week later, I came back with 2 friends to move the rest of my things. Dana was outside, watering her plants. She waved like nothing had happened. "Melissa," she called. I didn't answer, just kept my head down. But even now, sometimes I dream of that photo. Me asleep, peaceful, unaware. And what scares me most isn't the invasion. It's that I looked comfortable, like I belonged there, like I'd stopped being me and started becoming her. Not every kindness is innocent. Some people don't want you. They want your shape, your shadow, your silence. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. And the scariest thing isn't losing yourself. It's not noticing when it starts to happen. I moved into Midridge Apartments on a sweaty Thursday afternoon in late May. The kind of day where the air sticks to your back and makes cardboard boxes feel twice as heavy. Apartment 2C was the best I could get on my pay as an assistant librarian. Small, dimly lit, and stinking of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. But it was mine. After 26 years of breathing the same air as my parents, I needed out, and this was the escape I could afford. Midridge had that look. Not run down, just tired. Cracked tile in the entryway, mailboxes with broken latches, neighbors who barely looked up. It didn't scare me. If anything, it felt honest. The first time I saw her, I was dragging a mattress up the stairs. She passed me without a word, red hair tied back, earbuds in, a cigarette dangling from her fingers. She was thin, pale, looked over her shoulder twice before reaching her door. 2B. She didn't smile, didn't stop, but she nodded. That was enough to make her the most human interaction I'd had all day. I saw her again that night. She was smoking on the fire escape, 1 floor down from my bedroom window. I could hear faint humming, something soft. Her phone buzzed and she flinched like it had struck her. She answered in a low voice. No words came through clearly. Just that tone, quiet, clipped, and scared. That should have been the first sign. June came in sticky and slow. The building's AC had a permanent rattle, and my fan barely worked. Most nights I stayed up late reading or watching shows on my laptop with headphones on. The thin walls were good for picking up other people's lives. A toddler crying 2 floors up, someone sneezing in the hall, and more often than not, her crying. I didn't even know her name. She never spoke to me again, but I heard her. Around 2:15 one morning, I heard a bang, a heavy, meaty thud against the wall we shared. I froze, pulled off my headphones. Another sound, a man's voice. Low, angry, controlled. Then hers, soft, choked, pleading. Not loud enough to make words out. Just pain. I sat on the edge of my bed for 10 whole minutes, phone in hand. Not dialing, just staring. What do you even say to 911 when you don't know what's happening? Eventually it stopped. Silence settled in again. I lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, pretending the quiet meant safety. The next day I passed her in the stairwell. She wore sunglasses, though it was cloudy, and her cheek was bruised. Not purple, not fresh, but that sick yellow-brown of something healing, something ignored. I opened my mouth, closed it again. That night I wrote a note and left it with a granola bar by her door. If you ever need anything, I'm in 2C. No questions asked. It was gone the next morning. She never said a word. July turned brutal, hot, sleepless, suffocating. The building's AC finally gave out, and fans became background noise. But hers was gone, no humming, no late-night cigarettes, no footsteps on the fire escape, just crying, often, low and guttural. Sometimes she whispered things I couldn't catch, sometimes she said nothing at all. And him, the man in her unit, never raised his voice. But it was sharp, clipped, every word like it came with a warning. He didn't shout, but she flinched. I started writing in my journal about it, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. I even Googled it. How to report suspected abuse when you're not sure. Everything I found asked for details I didn't have. I started staying up late on purpose, hoping to catch her, hoping maybe she'd knock. But she never did. Then the noise stopped. Not faded. Stopped. No crying. No voices. No footsteps. I waited 3 days before asking the building manager. He shrugged like he was swatting away a fly. People move out. Happens all the time. That place turns over like socks. He unlocked her door on July 19th. The place was bare. Mattress on the floor, no curtains, a shirt tossed on the radiator. And that smell. Bleach. Like someone tried very hard to erase something. The next morning, I found the envelope under my door. It wasn't sealed, no name, no address. Inside was a single torn piece of paper. You heard everything, and you still let me go. My knees went weak. I sat down on the floor, letter trembling in my hands. Was it her? Was it him? I didn't know. I'd never know. I tried to rationalize. Told myself she probably left on her own. Maybe she had family somewhere. Maybe she just wanted to disappear. But the timing, the silence, the bleach, the note. It painted a picture I didn't want to admit I'd seen. I checked local news every day. Nothing. No missing person. No incident. No police reports. I thought about going to the police, but what would I say? That I once heard crying through the wall? That I got a vague note with no name? Instead, I stayed up more nights than I slept. I kept staring at that wall, listening for her voice, listening for anything. But all I heard was myself. It's been a year now. Someone else lives in 2B, a grad student who plays guitar and cooks bacon at 2 a.m. I see him sometimes. I nod. He nods back. We don't talk, but I still listen. Every creak of the hallway floor, every echo of laughter, every door closing, it all sounds like a version of her. I moved out of 2C 3 weeks ago, finally got a better job, better pay. But I still think about her every night. I think about the look in her eyes, the sound of her crying, and that note. I hear her voice in silence. I smell bleach in my dreams. I'll never know what really happened. And maybe that's the cruelest part, that some stories don't end. They just disappear. If you see something, say something. Silence doesn't make you innocent, and not acting can leave a heavier burden than the truth ever could. My name is Katie Brooks. I had just turned 17 when my father's job transferred us from Chicago to Bozeman, Montana. Leaving behind my old friends, my city rhythm, even the smell of traffic and roasting coffee, I plunged headfirst into this quiet mountain town where people rarely talked and the afternoons stretched into empty echoes. I felt rootless, adrift in a place that didn't feel like home. Summer days dragged. My phone rarely buzzed. My books and sketchbook were my companions, but they couldn't erase the silence. Then there was babysitting. I'd done it before. On weekends back in Chicago. Just casual afternoons playing games or reading stories. It was easy, low-pressure money, and more importantly, something to do. Back then, I babysat familiar kids, neighbors, friends of friends, people whose parents I knew. Here, in Bozeman, I didn't know anyone. But one morning, my mom's co-worker, Miss Clara Alden, asked if I could watch her grandson, Miles. She seemed kind enough. Retired piano teacher, nervous smile. But something about her made me hesitate. She warned me not to open the door under the stair, to respect the house's creaks, no loud music, no phone use. It felt oddly specific, serious. But I agreed. It was money, and frankly, any connection to other people felt welcome. The house, perched at 37A Briar Creek Road, was pale yellow and old. Vines curled across the porch, and an ancient rocking chair sat empty, waiting. I rang the bell at 3 in the afternoon. Clara, frail but precise, greeted me and reiterated her instructions. No phones, no music, certainly no opening that little understair door. Then she left, smiling tightly. After she closed the door, the house seemed to sigh, as if settling in my presence. Miles sat on the couch, hands folded, watching me. He didn't speak much. I offered to play with him, asked if he wanted snacks. He sat still and didn't move except to glance at that forbidden door. I tried to make small talk. At first, he replied in clipped sentences, softly. "I sit still," he told me. I tried Legos, games, drawing. Nothing changed. As the hours passed, the house's atmosphere shifted. The air was heavy with mothball smell and old wood. I sketched in my notebook while he sometimes leaned forward and whispered, "The girl before you opened it." I asked who that girl was. Miles blinked slowly. "She stayed behind the door." I shook it off. Kids say creepy things sometimes, but I found myself avoiding that stairwell, even as I painted maple leaves in the margins of my sketch. By 5, sunlight had begun to soften through dusty windows. I finally offered him lunch, peanut butter sandwich, grapes, crackers. He took them, ate quietly. I tried to ease the tension by chatting lightly. "Do you like to draw?" I asked. He said no, and stared down at the couch. I wondered if he'd been through something strange. At 6:45, I noticed the cellar door was wide. It should have been latched tight. I'd tried it earlier. Nobody else was in the house, so I closed and relocked it. My heart thumped. I looked for Miles. He was still perched on the couch, expression unchanged. At 7:10 p.m., I discovered another door I hadn't seen. It was almost invisible, tucked in a dark hallway near the back of the house. No knob, no sign it ever opened. A faint rectangle in the wall. I knelt closer. The outline looked like the shape of a door sealed long ago. My breath caught. When I asked him about it, Miles said in a calm voice, "It opens when someone disappears." That made no sense. I laughed quietly, pretending to dismiss it. The lights flickered. A breeze? Static wiring? I rose and pretended I wasn't unsettled. I called my mom, voice steady. "It's just weird here. The wiring's probably bad. Miles is fine." I promised I'd be okay, and she offered to pick me up early. Relief flickered through me. Then I heard it, a piano melody drifting from the direction of that sealed wall. Classical, slow, familiar. But there was no piano in the house. I recognized the tune, a Chopin nocturne my grandmother used to play. It came without warning, haunting and gentle. I pressed my ear to the wall. A whisper followed. I couldn't make out the words. I stumbled back. Miles had shifted closer on the couch, in a voice quieter than before. "She's playing again. Miss Clara's real granddaughter. She babysat me before she left the door open." I dropped into the chair, chills racing down my arms. My grandmother had died years ago. I'd never mentioned that Chopin piece. For a moment, I sat frozen in plain sight, waiting. At 9Y, the front door opened. Clara stepped in as the final note faded. Her smile was oddly satisfied. She looked at me and said, "You didn't touch the door, did you?" I shook my head, too numb to speak. She simply nodded, gathering her coat and keys as if relieved. "That's why you're leaving safely," she added. The weight in her eyes told me more than her words. She directed me quietly to gather my things, told me she was sorry I'd been unsettled, and ushered me to the door. Outside, the air felt sharp in my lungs. I searched for my mom's car out front. I tried to steady my breathing as Clara locked up behind me. My phone buzzed gently. I ignored it, staring down Briar Creek Road until my mom pulled up. The ride home was quiet. She asked. Silence felt too full of things unsaid. I swallowed, whispered, "Everything okay?" I nodded. Those few minutes of that house felt like it didn't want to let go. Later that night, curiosity overpowered fear. I searched online. I found a clipping dated July 9th, 2018. Clara Alden standing beside a young girl in graduation gown, her beloved granddaughter Emily Alden missing since July 9th, 2018. The same date, same day. My stomach nodded. The Chopin nocturne I'd heard, that rippled through the old walls, was the same melody my grandma used to play for me. That melody Emily likely knew too. My dreams that night were jumbled images, a small door opening, a girl's face pressed against the darkness, piano notes drifting through wood cracks. I woke in a panic, heart racing. Sunlight felt surreal. I didn't talk to anyone about it except my mom, and even then I kept details minimal. She trusted Clara. I never wanted my mom to worry, but I couldn't unhear the music or unsee that sealed doorway. School resumed the next week, and I slipped back into routine, sketching autumn leaves, working at the bookstore, walking around town. But I felt different. The world seemed thinner, more fragile. I started paying more attention to locked doors, people's expressions, how houses settle in silent ways. I found myself looking out at old houses in Bozeman and imagining secrets behind hidden doors, memories trapped in plaster walls. At home, I played my grandmother's Chopin recording, pressing rewind on that nocturne over and over. Sometimes I felt a presence in the house, as if someone were listening along. I thought of Emily Alden, 5 years missing, maybe still lingering behind some unmarked doorway in that pale yellow house. A few weeks later, at the cafe near town, I ran into Clara. She looked older than before, thin, pale, sorrow in her eyes. I nodded. She glanced at me, offered a sad smile. I wanted to tell her everything about the music, the door, the echo of that missing girl. But I knew she'd nod knowingly and wouldn't explain further. I didn't ask her about Emily. Some horrors aren't meant to be interrogated. Oddly, not long after, I received a message from Miss Clara. She said nothing about Emily but simply thanked me again, calling me careful and respectful. No mention of payment, no mention of fear, just gratitude that I hadn't meddled with things better left alone. I never babysat for her again. In fact, I pretty much stopped babysitting altogether. But I kept drawing, leaves, doors, silhouettes of stairs and old houses. I started volunteering at the Historical Society, collecting stories of old homes and the families who lived in them. I learned about memory, absence, the way people vanish, but their presence lingers in physical spaces. Sometimes I return to that Chopin nocturne, play it quietly with closed eyes, imagining Emily listening too. I think about young women stepping through thresholds, trusting and curious, and the vulnerability that comes with that. I believe in intuition now, how it heightens awareness, how it warns even when logic just says, be polite, follow instructions. I learned to listen to it anytime it whispers caution. Real places can hold hidden grief. Not all doors should be opened, not because they're locked, but because what lies behind them can't be unlearned. Trust your instincts. Respect boundaries, internal and external, even when doing so seems overly cautious or strange. And remember, silence, absence, and subtle warnings often carry more weight than screams.